Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Arnaud Causse wash processed Ecuador from Flower Child Coffee. And there's the bag right there. And Flower Child, based out of Oakland, California. And they're a coffee roaster that's appeared on this channel on multiple occasions, including most recently when we reviewed their Abel Salinas, a different wash processed Ecuadorian coffee. And in that review, I had mentioned that Flower Child was offering quite a few Ecuadorian coffees, including this one right here. I did need to make a quick distinction about this coffee. This one is the Arnaud Causse Bourbon, as Flower Child has also released a Pacamara from Arnaud Causse, which we will also be reviewing largely based off of this review. So let's go ahead and see how this coffee turned out. This right here is day 42. And recipe we went with for this coffee was our standard recipe, which is a 16:1 water to coffee ratio, brewed at 96 degrees Celsius, about 205 degrees Fahrenheit. I liked this one best through the V60, which indicates a more medium fine grind. Roast profile for this coffee, as we mentioned in our previous Flower Child review, they do roast on the lighter side of things relative to a lot of other American coffee roasters. This one I would say was maybe not quite as light as the Abel Salinas, but even then it's still a moderately light coffee by most standards and metrics. With all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. Day 15, first impression, and we did opt for the V60, and the cup came out very traditional South American, as it offered plenty of the nuttiness as well as some slight florality. There's a fair bit of sweetness, much more sweetness than I think I was initially expecting for this coffee, that skewed a little bit more in terms of that sugar cookie feel. It also had a fair bit of some brown sugar as well, so as a result, it was a pretty nice start. So this one definitely came out very traditional South American, a lot of what you might expect from older South American coffees, as it seems to have modernized quite a bit. This one specifically, I was just thinking of some of the Ecuadorian coffees we've reviewed long in the past as well, and I was kind of interested by that. We continue on to day 17 as we opted for the Chemex, and the cup continues to remain a bit interesting as it's offering a little bit cleaner and better defined of a chocolate base, with the acidity transitioning on the palate, which was very nice. Still sweeter than expected, a lot sweeter than expected, with more of the nuttiness as well, but a lot of the transition on the palate remains in terms of a variety of subtle berry fruit attributes to this one. A lot of some darker berry components to it as well, something like a blueberry, a grape, but they're in a little bit more of this kind of subtle sense to them. Day 20 through the April brewer, and it's still a bit more on the traditional South American side of things, with much more of that chocolate base and that heavier body, as the berry fruit brightness is still present with more of that sugar cookie, that kind of brown sugar sweetness to this one. So as of this moment, I've said, okay, I'm actually really appreciating the fact that this is a little bit more of a throwback. It's a little bit more of a nostalgic feel to this Ecuadorian coffee. And given that it's offering a much sweeter base to it, I was actually really impressed by the experiences we'd had. Day 24 through the V60 with some higher temperatures and a more fine grind, and there was a slight bit of improvement, though it felt like it was more from a bit of extended rest as opposed to the coffee actually improving from the adjustments we had made. Still offering plenty of the traditional South American coffee characteristics, with a pretty sweet chocolate forward base, great berry fruit complexity in the finish now as well, a slight bit of zesty citrus and a bit of some melon components, as well as some florality that's always been present within this one. So a lot of depth to it as well. Not necessarily just an overly straightforward coffee, but just a little bit better and well-rounded of a cup. Day 27 through the Chemex, and the same adjustments to the cup continues to remain surprisingly nice, as there's great depth to it with plenty of those South American characteristics, something that I continue to harp on and focus on because I think we've gotten away from it ever so slightly given just how many Mejorado Ecuadorian coffees we do review. This is a little bit more traditional, a little bit more classic of what we typically experience from Ecuadorian coffees in the past. Plenty of body, nice brightness, long-lasting brown sugar sweetness, subtle citric components as well. Another really nice day. Slightly repetitive, but that being said, all of these characteristics are felt in notable abundance. So you're picking out a lot of these things from this coffee, but they've been pretty consistent in that regard. Day 30 back through the V60 with our standard recipe, and it's really surprising me with how much sweetness there was. And keep in mind that we were comparing this one alongside of the Abel Salinas, and I said, I think this coffee is a slight bit sweeter than the Abel Salinas, which is not what I would have expected going into both of these coffees. Continues to offer that nostalgic South American profile with that brown sugar sweetness. Another excellent day. Really enjoyed this one. Day 33 through the Chemex, and the cup does feel like it's improving, at least in terms of the base of the chocolate and brown sugar, continuing to provide that nostalgic Ecuadorian characteristic feel to it. More dark berry components in the cup, that's been a pretty consistent theme in this one. Day 36, final notes we have one more try through the V60, and the continued consistency is still there as it offers that chocolate base with a surprisingly nice level of sweetness, something I continue to go back to, mostly because every time I drank this coffee I said, I'm surprised at just how sweet it is. A lot of things about this coffee would not necessarily lend itself to being as sweet as it is. Flower Child, I don't think necessarily prioritizes sweetness with their coffees, but couple that with the fact that, yeah, it is Loring coffee. It is a much more classic Ecuadorian coffee. I didn't necessarily expect it to turn out this way, but yet somehow it did, so it's why we keep going back to it, and the dark berry components continue to remain present in this one. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can't see what we're getting. And we have a lot of level 4s actually, so let's go through those, and we'll start with the body level 4. As mentioned, it had a fair bit of texture to it, and I think one of the really big things about this one is that's one of the more classic profiles, characteristics of these coffees in general, is that they can have a little bit more body, a little bit more texture. And given that this one was with the V60, it kind of surprised me. The Abel Salinas had a little bit more texture than I might have expected, so this one being brewed side by side with that one, I was able to tell just how much body there was in this coffee, and it's one of the highest scoring profiles of any coffee that we've had recently, at least in that specific category. Cleanliness, level 4. Yes, very clean coffee. Don't have too much to discuss on that. A lot of the profiles that were present within this one were very well defined and very well pronounced, most specifically the chocolate base. So really appreciated that part of this coffee. Finish, level 4. So it did have that ever so slight, we'll say, lingering classic Ecuadorian kind of feel to it. So that ever so slight citric component, but that chocolate base that seemed to linger a fair bit. But you're getting some nice sugary aspects to that as well. So all of those things did give it a very nicely well-defined finish to the cup as well. Sweetness, level 4. I've been talking about that a lot, and I was never going to score a level 5. I would have been stunned if a coffee like this could have scored a level 5 in terms of the sweetness. But going into it, I was fully expecting maybe a level 3, maybe a lower side of level 4. But given that this one was on par and at times sweeter than the Abel Salinas coffee, that was a really big surprise to me, as it just remained a very sweet coffee, at least in terms of the sugary sweetness that continued to remain present throughout. So one of my favorite parts of this coffee is a surprisingly nice level of sweetness. Acidity, level 4. Also an interestingly high level of brightness. It's another thing that I might not have necessarily expected with this one, but there is a fair bit of those berry attributes that seem to just offer a little bit of brightness to it as well. So level 4, yeah, seems fitting. Berry fruit, level 4. As kind of mentioned, it did have that darker berry theme to it, which has also been a little bit more of a nostalgic throwback, classic South American coffee feel. That was definitely an ever-present characteristic of this one as well. So berry fruit scoring pretty high, pretty consistent in this one too. Citrus, level 4. I would say that if anything, that's probably one of the things that was maybe a slight bit less defined, but it did offer that in terms of also a little bit of brightness that was kind of contrasting to that as well. Also present within the finish too, so citrus, level 4, a fair bit of that present within this one. Chocolate, level 4. As I kind of mentioned, the chocolate base to this one really did seem to set the tone for what this coffee was going to be from that point going forward, as it was an ever-present quality to it, so I was fully expecting that to maybe be one of the dominant characteristics, but given just how beautifully it was portrayed within this coffee, I was really pleasantly surprised at just the level of how it was and then how it turned out. Then we have, I think, just a couple level 3s. So the florality, level 3, I think that's a little bit in a complementary sense that chocolate has got that ever so slight floral chocolate feel to it. I don't have too much to say on that. It just seemed when making this tasting, when I said I'm pulling out enough of it to justify that level 3 mark, wasn't something that was on the forefront of my mind throughout. Caramel, level 3, there is a little bit of that kind of classic South American feel, that classic South American caramel characteristic to it that also did offer a little bit of sweetness. I think I wanted to lump the brown sugar into that category as well, as that was one of the more, we'll say, defining factors of this coffee. When I was able to get that within the finish, it really seemed to kind of be the cherry on top, the finishing piece of this coffee. And then, yeah, honestly, as I'm looking at the rest of this tasting, I don't think that there's anything else we're discussing. I do think it's a pretty good representation of what I was getting from this coffee. All right, so my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. I was really surprised that I ended up liking this coffee a little bit more than the Abel Salinas, because going into it, I only purchased this coffee because I just kind of wanted to tack something onto the Flower Child order, since we were going to be ordering a couple of coffees from them. And I did not know that they were going to be releasing the Juan Peña, and I did not know that they were going to be releasing a different Arnaud Causse coffee. So this was the only one that on paper sounded like a coffee that I would be interested in. And I was mostly interested in this coffee because I was expecting it to be maybe a little bit more of that traditional Ecuadorian coffee. And that's exactly what it was, but it was such a well done representation of a classic South American Ecuadorian coffee specifically, that I ended up just really appreciating this coffee for what it was. But this hasn't been lost on me that this is typically how I feel about these sort of coffees. When you do offer a lighter profile like Peruvian coffee or like a Mexican coffee from a coffee roaster that seems to do them really well, I really seem to enjoy those coffees much more as like a guilty pleasure sort of thing. This isn't going to end up as a top 10 coffee nominee or even on that list anywhere, but I just really appreciated all of the things that this coffee did offer with the lighter profile to it, as I think it just seemed to help accentuate some of the best qualities that this coffee did offer. Type of person I would suggest this coffee to, this is a very easy recommend. If you've enjoyed the more classic South American, specifically Ecuadorian profiles, also think like Peruvian profiles of the coffee, a little bit more of that chocolatey, a little bit more of that caramel, that nutty base, the sugary base, the darker berry attributes. This one's a great fit for you. Also keep in mind the lighter profile of it, because I think that seems to just kind of tie all of this coffee together. And then you'll get this one specifically, as it seems to just offer those in really nice definition and really nice abundance. I think that's also the best way I can leave this review. If you by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, I'd love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Arnaud Causse Bourbon wash processed Ecuador from Flower Child Coffee. Thank you for watching.